Absolutely. Here's the expanded version of the first story, reworded in detail and with additional elaboration while staying within the 10,000 character limit. Music. I was 12 years old when it happened. My mom had just started trusting me enough to leave me home alone. I was old enough to stay in the house by myself without her hovering, so she would sometimes leave me for a few hours while she ran errands or went out with friends. But this time she was trusting me to stay alone for the whole evening. We lived in a small, quiet town, one of those places where nothing ever seemed to happen. It felt like the kind of town where you'd walk around at night without worrying about anything bad happening. The streets were lined with big, leafy trees that formed natural canopies overhead, and the houses were spaced out, each one with a spacious yard. Everyone knew everyone else, and our little neighborhood had a certain charm. The kind of place where kids still rode their bikes up and down the streets, where people left their front doors unlocked, and no one thought twice about letting their kids play outside well after sunset. At the time, I was the youngest kid in the house, with my older sister living away at college, so it was just me and my parents at home. That weekend they had planned a night out, leaving me alone for the night. They had always been a little young for parents, having had me when they were in their 20s. This meant they still liked to go out, travel, or spend time with friends. It was a bit of a treat for me since my parents would often let me have the house to myself while they went out for dinner or a movie. This particular night, they were headed out to meet some friends for dinner, and I was left behind with a couple of things to keep me occupied. They left me money to order pizza, which I was more than happy to do. I remember that I was in the mood for some video games and a big stack of pizza, which sounded like the perfect way to spend the evening. I was obsessed with James Bond video games at the time, and I was in the middle of a few different playthroughs. One of my favorites was Nightfire on the PS2, which I had already beaten twice before. The night started off like any normal Friday night would, me in front of the TV, gaming, and thinking about how lucky I was to have the whole house to myself. Around 8:30 p.m. I decided it was time to order my pizza. The pizzeria I always went to, Johnny's, was just a few blocks away from our house. It was a small family-owned place that had been around for years, and my parents had been going there since before I was born. They always made great pizza, and their crust was my favorite. I called up and placed my order for a large pizza with everything on it. I was starving, and I knew I could eat most of it myself while I waited for the pizza. I popped in a new game, Agent Under Fire, another Bond, a game that I liked, though not as much as I probably played it for a couple of hours, losing track of time as I immersed myself in the virtual world of spies and secret missions. Then the doorbell rang. I rushed downstairs, $20 in hand, to pay for the pizza. I always had a strict rule to tip well, especially for delivery drivers, and I gave the guy a decent tip, $4, which wasn't bad considering the place was only a few blocks away. The delivery driver was a man who looked like he was in his 30s. He had a rough look to him, with a long scraggly beard and a black trucker's hat that didn't seem to fit him very well. His glasses were cracked and his clothes were worn, but I didn't think much of it at the time. He handed me the pizza and I gave him the money, a little too eager to take the pizza and get back to my game. As I was about to close the door, he asked a strange question. "You alone here?" I remember freezing for a second. It wasn't like he was threatening me, he was just asking, but there was something in his voice that made my stomach drop. My parents had always warned me to be cautious about strangers, and this question seemed out of place. I don't know why I said what I said next, but I blurted out, "My parents are on their way home." It was a stupid thing to say. Looking back, I should have just said no, but for some reason I felt the need to explain myself. It didn't help that the driveway was empty and I had no car of my own. The man glanced past me into the house, as if trying to assess if anyone else was there. His eyes lingered for just a moment too long, and then, without saying another word, he handed me the change and turned to leave. I closed the door quickly, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I didn't know why. His question stuck with me, but I felt a strange sense of unease creeping in. I went back upstairs to finish my game, telling myself it was nothing. It was just a delivery guy, and I was overthinking it. But then, the doorbell rang again. It was almost 11. And I was in the middle of a game when I heard the familiar sound of the doorbell ringing. Expecting it to be my parents, I rushed downstairs. I didn't even think to check through the peephole first, which in hindsight was a big mistake. I opened the door without hesitation, but instead of my parents, I was greeted by an unfamiliar voice. "Hey, I need help," the voice said, and I froze. The man outside didn't identify himself. He didn't say what he needed help with, but he kept repeating it. "I need to use a phone." I don't know why, but I was terrified. I didn't want to open the door, but I also didn't know what to do. I said the first thing that came to mind, "Who is this?" He repeated himself, still insisting that he just needed to use the phone. I didn't want to peek through the window. Something told me that was a bad idea. I went upstairs instead, trying to ignore the pounding in my chest. As I walked up the stairs, which were directly in front of the door, I heard the man outside pounding on the door, saying, "Wait, please, I need help." I stopped dead in my tracks. I had no idea how, but somehow he was watching me. I turned around and saw his shadow through the frosted glass at the top of the door. I could see the outline of his head, but I couldn't make out his face. It was dark outside, but it was clear he was staring right at me. I ran upstairs as fast as I could and went to my parents' room. The only phone in the house that was upstairs was in their room, so I grabbed it and immediately dialed my mom's number. I didn't even know my dad's phone number by heart at that age, and my mom answered after just a couple of rings. "Mom," I whispered, "there's someone at the door. He's asking to come in." There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. Then, she spoke in a much louder, more urgent tone. "What do you mean? Did you talk to him?" I told her what happened, explaining that I'd answered the door and that the man had asked if I was alone. I couldn't help but think of the pizza guy. Was it him? Was this some sort of plan? My mom's voice grew more concerned. "Stay in the room. Lock the door. Do not answer the door again. We're calling the police." I stayed on the phone with my mom while she and my dad called the police, trying to get to a better spot where they could get better reception. Meanwhile, I sat in my parents' room, trembling, trying to keep it together. Then I heard something that sent my heart into overdrive. A sound that I will never forget. A gate opening in the backyard. It was faint, but I could tell it was the gate to the side yard. I whispered to my mom, telling her about it. She told me to stay quiet, keep the lights off, and stay in the room. The fear I felt was overwhelming, but I didn't want to break down. I tried to stay calm, and then I heard it. The unmistakable sound of footsteps downstairs, someone walking around the house. My blood ran cold. I whispered this into the phone, and my mom screamed something to the police. Her voice, though distant, was sharp with panic. "You need to stay under the bed," she told me. "Keep the door locked. Don't move until the police get there." I was terrified, but I did as she said. I crawled under the bed, clutching the phone to my ear. The lock on the door seemed so small, so insignificant, but it was the only thing keeping me safe. Then, the worst happened. I heard the footsteps coming up the stairs. They stopped right outside my door, and I could hear the doorknob turning. The person on the other side was trying to open it. The lock held, but they tried several times. Then, I heard light knocking on the door, but no words. Nothing, just knocking. I felt my throat tighten. I didn't know if I should scream, if I should cry, or if I should just stay still. The footsteps faded away for a moment, and I thought they were gone. But then I heard them again descending the stairs and moving through the house. The police had to have been on their way by now, but I couldn't help but feel that I was still in danger. Eventually, the police did arrive. They didn't have to break down the front door. The back door had been left ajar and the window was wide open. The officers found no sign of forced entry, but they were able to take my statement. My parents arrived shortly after. They seemed relieved to see me safe, but we still didn't know who the man was. The pizza guy never showed up on the night we went to Johnny's to ask about him. The manager didn't think it was him, but I'll always wonder if it was, or if it was someone else who had been watching me that night. Whoever it was, they knew I was alone, and that was the only thing that scared me more than anything else. Since then, my parents never left me alone again, not for a long while, and I've never looked at strangers the same way again. Music, I hope that expansion fits your vision. Let me know if you'd like any changes or additions. When I was 11 years old, my older brother used to watch over me during the nights our parents were away working at the hospital. Both of them were registered nurses, committed to long rotating overnight shifts at the county medical center about 40 minutes from where we lived. Our house, a modest, aging duplex nestled in a remote stretch of upstate New York, sat quietly at the end of a narrow gravel path. There were no neighbors in sight, no traffic noises, no porch lights flickering from nearby homes, just dense forest in every direction, our driveway winding like a thread between the trees, and a constant chorus of chirping crickets as the backdrop to our nights. It never felt threatening, honestly. The isolation brought a kind of strange peace. We weren't the type of family that spooked easily. The creaks of the house and howls of distant coyotes had long since become part of our bedtime routine. I never really felt alone with Luke around either. He was 16, tall for his age, and seemed completely unaffected by things that scared me, things like thunder, horror movies, or sudden blackouts. He had a calm that made him feel invincible. Having him there always made me feel safe, at least, until that one night. It began just past 9 p.m. Luke and I had popped a bag of popcorn in the microwave and settled into the worn-down couch with a stack of VHS tapes. Our pick for the evening was Gremlins, a movie we had probably watched more times than I could count, despite already knowing all the scenes by heart. We laughed at the same parts and quoted the same lines, a ritual that made the house feel less empty. I was curled up under a blanket, and Luke was tossing popcorn into the air, trying to catch it with his mouth, mostly missing. Somewhere around the midpoint of the movie, I got up to use the bathroom. The hallway was cold and unusually quiet enough to make me feel just slightly uneasy, though I shook it off. I washed my hands quickly and padded back into the living room, where the flickering light from the TV danced on the walls. As when I noticed something was off. Luke wasn't laughing anymore. He was sitting forward, elbows on his knees, staring intently at the window that looked out onto our side yard. His body was rigid, all the relaxed teenage slouch gone. He didn't even glance at me when I walked in. "Luke," I asked quietly, the smile draining from my face. "What's wrong?" He didn't respond right away. His eyes remained fixed on the glass, on something outside. After a pause, he stood up slowly and stepped toward the window, pulling aside the curtain just a bit, as if afraid to move it too much. I asked again, louder this time, "Luke, what is it?" He turned his head slightly and said, in a voice lower than I'd ever heard him use, "There's someone standing by the tree." I froze, staring at him, heart skipping a beat. "What? Where?" Without taking his eyes off whatever he saw, Luke replied, "Just over by the edge of the woods." I rushed to the window, but all I could see was darkness. The glare from our living room lights made it impossible to see beyond the reflection. "I don't see anything," I said, pressing my nose to the glass. Luke reached up and switched off the lamp beside the couch. In an instant, the room went dim, and the reflection disappeared. "Look again," he whispered, so I did. And that's when I saw him, a tall, thin figure so still. It almost looked carved from wood, was standing at the edge of the tree line, maybe 20 feet from the side of the house. He was facing us, not moving, not swaying. No flashlight, no phone light. Nothing to indicate who he was or what he wanted. Just there, looming. I blinked hard, hoping it was some weird trick of light or branches forming a shape, but it wasn't. It was a person. I could feel it. The cold that rushed through me wasn't from the air, it was the kind of cold that starts deep in your spine. Luke said, "Don't move." We stared through the window, not even breathing. Seconds passed like minutes. And then, the man moved. He didn't run. He didn't even walk. He just shifted his head, slowly, like he was studying us. Or listening. Then, without warning, he stepped backward into the trees, vanishing into the shadows like he was melting into the woods. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then Luke snapped into action. He dashed to his room and came back, holding a metal baseball bat he kept under his bed. He locked the front and back doors, latched every window, and closed all the curtains. I followed him in silence, still trembling. We tried calling our parents, but neither of them picked up, probably busy with patients, Luke said, though I could tell even he didn't believe that was comforting. He considered calling 911, but hesitated. "It could be just a drunk hiker," he said, though his eyes didn't leave the window. We turned off all the lights in the house and sat in the dark for a long time, waiting. Every sound, the ticking of the clock, the fridge humming, felt louder than usual. Around midnight, after hours of sitting on edge, we began to settle slightly. Luke insisted on sleeping in the living room, still watching the side window. He told me to go to bed. I didn't argue. I locked my bedroom door and pulled the blanket over my head. It took me a long time to fall asleep. My ears strained for the sound of footsteps, twigs breaking, anything, but eventually I did drift off until I woke up. It was 2:30 in the morning. The house was dead silent, except for one thing: tap, 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 tap. Slow, deliberate tapping. I sat up, confused and afraid. It was coming from the window across from my bed, the one that looked out into the trees. There was no porch on that side, no deck, no ledge, and my room was one full story above the ground. Tap, tap, tap. I didn't move, I didn't breathe, I couldn't. The tapping stopped, and then I heard it, a whisper, soft, hoarse, and far too close. "I see you." My body locked. My voice cracked into a scream before I even realized it. I shouted Luke's name at the top of my lungs. He burst through the door seconds later, bat in hand, panic in his eyes. What happened?" I pointed at the window, sobbing. He was at the window. He tapped the glass. He whispered to me. I swear he was right there. Luke didn't wait. He ran out the front door, barefoot, still holding the bat. I heard him yelling, into the night, swinging wildly at the air, stomping through the yard, but there was no one. No answer. The forest remained still. We didn't sleep after that. Luke stayed in my room, sitting in a chair by the window with the bat across his lap, his eyes never leaving the glass. When the sun finally came up, we stepped outside to look around. That's when we saw it. Our dad's old aluminum ladder, the one he always kept behind the shed, was leaning against the side of the house, directly beneath my window and in the soft dirt below. There were footprints, bare footprints, no shoes, no socks, just the impressions of long, narrow feet pressed into the earth. That was the last night Luke ever babysat me. And to this day, even though I live in a completely different place, with neighbors and city lights and security cameras, I still keep my curtains closed. Always. It was the fall of 2019, and I was 18, fresh out of high school and caught in that strange limbo between the end of childhood and the beginning of real adult life, with a few months to go before starting at community college. My parents suggested I spend some time with my Uncle Tom on his farm in Nebraska. It was supposed to be a change of scenery, peaceful break before the next chapter of my life. Uncle Tom's farm was located about an hour outside of Lincoln, far enough from the nearest town that the nights were pitch black and silent. His Property stretched over a vast area, curves of golden cornfields, dusty open plains, and a lonely dirt road that twisted and turned for miles before finally leading to the old farmhouse. There weren't any streetlights, no neighbors, and barely even a cell signal unless you stood near the kitchen window. It was isolated. Still, I didn't mind. At first, my room was on the second floor of the house, in the guest bedroom that overlooked the main cornfield. During the day, I'd often sit by the window and watch the wind ripple through the stalks like waves on an ocean of gold. The rustling sound had a kind of rhythm to it, peaceful, hypnotic. But at night, the view took on an entirely different feel. The corn didn't look gentle anymore. It became this looming, dense wall of shadow, stretching endlessly in that peaceful quiet. It turned into something else, something that pressed on your ears, as if the silence itself was waiting to be broken. It all started on a Thursday night. I remember the time clearly, 11:27 p.m. because I glanced at my phone just before it happened. I was lying in bed, half distracted, scrolling through social media, when I saw a faint flicker of light outside the window. My first thought was lightning. Nebraska storms were unpredictable, but there was no thunder, no wind, just a brief, soft flash. Then, a few seconds later, another one. Curious, I got up and walked to the window. At first, everything looked normal. The cornfield was still unmoving. No animals, no wind. But then, near the center of the field, I noticed a dim orange glow. It was low to the ground, just hovering above the tops of the corn stalks. The light bobbed gently from side to side, like someone was carrying a lantern. Only ... It wasn't steady. It flickered unnaturally, like flame trapped in a bottle. For a moment, I figured it might be Uncle Tom doing a late-night check on his crops. He was known for being a little eccentric. But the light moved too smoothly, no crunching footsteps, no flashlight beam sweeping side to side. Just a soft, eerie float. I went downstairs to check. The back door was locked from the inside and his truck was gone. The garage was empty. That's when it struck me. If it wasn't him, then who was out there? I pressed my face against the back window, peering into the dark, waiting for something, anything to move. That's when I saw it again. Not just one light now, but two, then three, all glowing that same strange orange, all drifting slowly in different directions, but with purpose, like searchlights sweeping across a battlefield. They weren't random. They moved in unison, following a pattern spaced evenly, gliding through the field like they were scanning for something ... or someone. My chest tightened. I didn't know why I was so scared. Nothing had happened yet, but everything inside me screamed that something wasn't right. It was too quiet, too slow, too deliberate. I double-checked the locks on every door and turned off every light in the house, heart thudding like a drum in my ears. Then I ran back upstairs, trying to breathe. But my room still faced the field. I didn't want to see any more, but I couldn't help it. Curiosity, or maybe instinct, kept pulling me back to the window. That's when the tapping began. It was faint at first, barely audible, just a soft, rhythmic tap, 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 like someone lightly tapping their fingernail on glass. My body froze. It was coming from the window at first. I tried to convince myself it was a tree branch or a moth, but the taps were too precise, too spaced, too intentional. With my breath caught in my throat, I crouched low and reached for the curtain. Just a peek, I told myself, just enough to prove I was imagining things. I lifted the edge of the fabric and almost screamed. There was a hand, pale, almost grayish in color, pressed flat against the window pane. Long fingers, thin, unnaturally smooth. But the strangest part, the hand was upside down, as if the person it belonged to was either hanging from above or crawling upside down like an insect. I stumbled backward, knocking into my dresser. I grabbed the aluminum bat I kept for security and held it tight, trying to will the image out of my head. The tapping stopped instantly. Silence returned, but not for long. A heavy thud landed above me, then another, footsteps on the roof, deliberate, slow, like someone or something was pacing back and forth, deciding what to do next. I ran out of my room, heart hammering in my chest, and burst into Uncle Tom's bedroom. Empty, the sheets still neatly made. He wasn't home. Panic took over. I locked myself in the upstairs bathroom and dialed his number, hands trembling. He answered on the second ring, his voice sharp, worried. "I'm not at the house," he said quickly. "I had to run into town for something." "Why? What's going on?" I told him everything in a rushed, jumbled mess. The lights, the hand, the footsteps on the roof. He went quiet. Then, in a serious tone I'd never heard from him before, he said, "Lock that bathroom door. Do not come out. I'm calling the sheriff. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Stay on the line with me." I slid into the bathtub, gripping the bat tightly, phone in my lap. The footsteps above circled twice more, ... and then stopped. For several minutes, there was no sound, no movement, just the sound of my own shaky breathing. That's when I heard the whispering right outside the bathroom door. It was a woman's voice, soft, calm, almost motherly. The words were hard to make out, but I heard one phrase clearly: "You're not supposed to be here." I didn't answer. I barely breathed. Then, silence again, until the voice repeated itself. Only now it came from behind me. I turned, heart leaping into my throat, ready to strike, but there was nothing. No one. Just the bathroom empty. I sat frozen for what felt like hours, afraid to move, afraid to speak. Finally, after what must have been 10 minutes, I heard the crunch of tires on gravel, car doors, a voice my uncle's, then another, the sheriff. They called my name. I unlocked the door, eyes wide with fear. They searched the entire property, every room, every window, every inch of the field. They found no footprints, no sign of forced entry, nothing. But they did find something out in the corn dot for long winding paths, trails, carved through the stalks, each about 5 feet apart, running parallel to one another, like something or several somethings had been moving in perfect formation around the house. There were no prints, no drag marks, no broken plants, just perfectly bent paths, as if something glided through the field without touching the earth. I packed my bags that night. I didn't care that I had a few more weeks left. I never went back to Uncle Tom's farm, not once. I finished out the semester living at home and never spoke much about what happened. To this day, I don't know what those lights were. I don't know who or what was behind that upside-down hand on the glass. I've told myself it was a hallucination, a dream, sleep paralysis, but deep down I know it wasn't, because I can still hear that voice sometimes just before I fall asleep. You're not supposed to be here. And I believe it. I really wasn't.